Okay, so get this. You're going to Mexico City.
Lucky you.
I know, right? And listen to this. You sent over, like, articles, blog posts, even a whole YouTube travel guide.
Wow.
Yeah, you've really done your research.
Yeah.
But don't worry, we're going to go through it all and, like, pick out all the good stuff, the must-knows
Yeah,
for a
absolutely.
first-timer. You ready for this deep dive?
Let's do it. It's a fantastic city. You're going to have such a good time.
I bet.
Mexico City is one of those places that just has everything. History, culture, the food, the art scene.
Right.
But with so much to do, planning can feel a little, I don't know, daunting, maybe.
Totally. And the YouTube video, you say, kind of jumps right into that.
Oh, yeah.
Starting with, like, how massive it is. They actually call it a mega city.
Yeah. It's,
With, get this, over 22 million people.
it's a lot of people.
I know. I have to admit that makes me a little nervous. Like a little lost in the crowd, kind of nervous.
I get it. It's a natural reaction. But there's something the video points out that's really important.
Okay.
It might be big, but Mexico City doesn't actually feel overwhelmingly huge once you're there.
Really?
A lot of the main attractions, they're kind of all clustered together in
Ah.
these really walkable neighborhoods. So exploring is actually pretty manageable and enjoyable.
That's a relief. Now, something that surprised me in the video was how much they talked about the museums in Mexico City.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yes.
I know Europe is famous for its museums, but Mexico City, I hadn't really thought about that too much.
It's a hidden gem for a lot of people.
I think you're right.
They're genuinely world-class, offering such a unique perspective on both history and culture. I would suggest, for your first trip, to focus on just a couple of key ones.
Right. Got to prioritize.
Yeah.
And the video actually gives a pretty good starter pack, if you will, for must-see museums.
Nice.
Top of the list, the National Museum of Anthropology.
It's a good one.
They actually called it, quote, the biggest collection of artifacts from the pre-Columbian civilization.
That's a bold statement.
I know, right? It definitely got my attention.
It's more than just a statement, though. It's true.
Okay, tell me more.
It's an absolute treasure trove.
Wow.
Imagine, standing in front of the Sunstone, this massive Aztec calendar,
Yeah.
feeling like the weight of centuries staring back at you.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah.
That's the kind of experience that makes it a must-see, not just for Mexico City, for anybody interested in history.
They're always selling it.
It houses artifacts from the Aztecs, the Mayans, the Olmec civilizations that shaped the Americas. I mean,
Yeah.
it's mind-blowing.
Okay, you've sold me. Sunstone, here I come.
Yes.
Next up on the videos list is this Museum of Popular Art,
Okay.
which they say a lot of the regular travel guides, they miss it.
Interesting.
They describe it as like this burst of color, colorful flower patterns, stylized Day of the Dead figurines, and all sorts of indigenous motifs.
Sounds visually stunning.
Right.
Very vibrant, lively, a true celebration of Mexican folk art and crafts.
I like it.
It's a fantastic way to really connect with, the artistic soul of the country, both the traditional and the contemporary stuff.
All right, I'm adding it to the list. Okay, moving on to some bigger names. Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera.
Oh, nice.
I'll be honest, I mostly know about them from that movie Frida,
Oh, yeah.
which, by the way, is amazing if you haven't seen it.
It's such a good movie.
I know. The video does a good job, though, of explaining their, distinct styles,
Mhm.
which I think is really helpful because,
Right.
I always get a mixed
No,
bag.
they were both incredibly influential, but yeah, very different.
Right, right.
Diego Rivera, he's famous for those huge murals,
Yeah.
depicting Mexican life and history. To really get it, to understand it, I'd recommend seeing his work with a guide.
Oh, interesting.
Someone who can kind of provide the context,
Yeah, that makes sense.
The most famous one's in the National Palace, but you'll need reservations for that.
Good to know.
If that doesn't work out, though, the Diego Rivera Mural Museum is a really good alternative.
Got it. And for Frida Kahlo, the video mentions several different places you can see her work.
Yes, her art is kind of spread across a few locations.
Oh, okay.
There's the Dolores Olmedo Museum, the Modern Art Museum, and then, of course, there's the Frida Kahlo Museum, which is actually her childhood home.
Oh, wow.
That one's a really popular, but the video actually recommends seeing her work at one of the other places.
Really?
That museum can get pretty crowded and honestly a little overpriced.
Good to know. Okay, and this is where the video gets really interesting, historically speaking.
Oh, yeah.
They start talking about the Temple of Mayor, the remains of a pyramid right in the heart of the city.
Wow.
And get this, Mexico City was originally built on a lake.
No way.
And right in the center of the lake was this massive pyramid-like structure.
That's incredible.
I know, right?
Hmm.
Sadly, the Spanish conquistadors completely destroyed it.
Ah, that's a shame. But it's a good reminder, I think, of all of those layers of history
Yeah.
that make Mexico City so unique.
Right.
It's fascinating to think about, like, how the city was literally built on top of what came before.
Yeah. Yeah.
What you see of the Templo Mayor today, it's basically just the foundation, the ruins.
Mm.
You really have to use your imagination to picture what it once was.
I can only imagine.
Luckily, though, there's a museum right next door
Oh, nice.
with artifacts that, really complement what you see at the Anthropological Museum, so it kind of gives you a much richer understanding.
It's like peering back in time.
Exactly.
Amazing. So besides all these incredible museums and ruins, the video mentions a few other must-sees.
Okay.
They recommend the Torre Latinoamericana for panoramic views of the city,
It's a classic.
the Zocalo and the Metropolitan Cathedral for like a dose of history and architecture,
Both stunning in their own way.
and then Chapultepec Forest
Oh, yes.
for a little nature escape without leaving the city.
Love that place.
This itinerary is shaping up nicely.
It is. It is.
And we haven't even talked about the food yet. The video was like raving about the food in Mexico City.
Oh, the food. Prepare yourself. It's a foodie's paradise.
No kid?
You've got, Michelin-starred restaurants, incredible street food, everything in between.
Wow.
For first-timers, though, I always say prioritize those local, authentic experiences.
So more like neighborhood restaurants and street food.
You got it.
The video definitely makes street food sound like a must-do.
Oh, it is.
I'm all for it. But as a self-proclaimed taco newbie, I'm a little intimidated by all the choices.
I hear you.
You got any tips for navigating the taco scene?
The video actually has a good tip for this.
Okay.
They say the default taco is usually listed first, and it's often tacos al pastor.
Okay.
It's marinated pork cooked on a vertical spit, often with pineapple.
Sounds good.
They're a classic for a reason. If you're feeling adventurous, the fillings like tripe or tongue, those are usually further down the list.
Oh, okay. I'll stick to al pastor for now.
Good choice. Start there, and who knows, you might work your way up to those more adventurous options.
Al pastor it is. Now, the video also mentions a few day trips from Mexico City that sound pretty epic.
Oh, yeah.
They highlight the Teotihuacan
And
Pyramid,
Sophians are a must-see.
the Xochimilco Canals,
So fun.
and then Lucha Libre, which is like Mexican wrestling.
Such a unique experience.
I know. Each one seems like a completely different experience and a different perspective on Mexican culture.
For sure.
Let's break them down, one by one.
Okay.
First up, pyramids. I've seen pictures. They're massive. I can't even imagine seeing those things in person.
They are truly awe-inspiring. Teotihuacan is this massive archaeological site. It's actually easy to get to by metro and bus.
Oh, that's good.
The video creator mentions that they went on their own at first, but they later wished they had a guide, just to kind of provide more context,
Yeah, that makes sense.
A guided tour might be something to consider.
Yeah, I can see how that would enhance the experience.
You learn so much more about the history and the significance.
Good point. Okay, what about Xochimilco? The video describes it as like this network of canals with these colorful boats, food, drinks, mariachi music.
It's basically a party on the water.
It sounds amazing, but I also get like a slight tourist trap vibe. Be honest. What do you think?
Honestly, you're not wrong. It can feel a little touristy, especially if you go during peak times.
Okay.
But it's also a popular spot for locals, especially on the weekends.
Oh, really?
It's a fun way to experience like a more traditional side of Mexican culture.
Huh. Okay.
They recommend in the video to go with a group, for the fun factor, but also to kind of share the cost of things, like the mariachi bands.
That's a good idea. Okay, last but not least, Lucha Libre. I've heard it's a wild spectacle.
It really is.
Totally unlike anything else.
Imagine this. High energy, super theatrical wrestling, but with a crowd that's just as into it.
Oh, wow.
They're part of the show.
That's so cool.
For this one, the video recommends a tour as well.
Oh, yeah.
Mainly because going with a group makes it even more fun, and the guide can explain all the storylines,
Right.
the characters, and the cultural significance of Lucha Libre, which really adds to the experience.
All right, so we've got museums, historical sites, delicious food, epic day trips. It's a lot to take in. But now for the important question. Where to stay in this, like, massive city?
Ah, yes. Good question.
The video actually narrows it down to two main areas.
Okay.
They talk about El Centro, which is the city center,
Uh-huh.
and then La Condesa and Roma,
Love those neighborhoods.
which are like these neighboring areas known for their like trendy vibes.
Totally.
Let's start with El Centro.
Mm.
What are the pros and cons of staying right in the heart of it all?
Well, the main advantage is convenience, right? You're right in the middle of everything, close to all the major attractions. The downside is that it can feel a bit empty at night, maybe a little less lively,
I say
especially
that,
after all the shops close.
that makes sense. What about La Condesa in Roma? The video called them like a fantasy version of Mexico City.
It's pretty good description.
It definitely caught my attention.
Imagine this. Tree-lined streets, beautiful Art Deco buildings, sidewalk cafes, trendy boutiques, and just this energy, you know?
Yeah, I like the sound of that.
That's La Condesa in Roma. They're beautiful, residential, considered like the more upscale, hipster areas of the city. But of course, that also means they are more expensive than staying in El Centro.
Right. Trade-offs.
And that whole hipster vibe might not be for everyone.
So it's like choosing between convenience and, I guess, ambiance.
Exactly.
Okay, before we move on, the video ends with some practical advice on things like transportation, internet, and money stuff.
Always helpful.
Any highlights there I should keep in mind?
They recommend using a mix of transportation options.
Okay.
Like taxis and Ubers are obviously convenient, but the metro is really, really cheap.
Uh-huh.
And it's efficient, especially if you're sticking to the main parts of the city. It can get a bit crowded and confusing, though.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Their tip was to download a metro map beforehand.
Noted. What about internet access? Will I be able to, stay connected?
Oh, totally. You can easily get a local SIM card
Okay.
if you need data, you know.
Yeah.
The video mentions Telcel specifically, even breaks down the pricing and data allowances.
That's helpful.
Oh, and they point out that Mexico City has free Wi-Fi pretty much everywhere.
Seriously.
Yeah, the network is called Internet para Todos, which means internet for everyone.
Wow, that's awesome. All right, last but not least, money matters. Should I be relying on credit cards, or is cash still king?
They actually advise against relying just on plastic.
Interesting.
ATMs are easy to find,
Yeah.
but, watch out for fees.
Of course.
They warn about BBVA specifically.
Okay,
Apparently, they have pretty high fees.
good to know.
So a mix of cash and cards is probably the best way to go.
Makes sense. Wow, this is already so helpful. I'm starting to get a feel for what to expect.
It's coming together.
I know, right?
With all your research and a little guidance, I think you're going to have an amazing trip.
I'm feeling much more confident already.
That's what we like to hear.
So before we dive into all the other details of your trip planning, like
Yeah.
flights and where you're going to stay, what's caught your attention so far? What are you most excited to see?
What about you? What's standing out to you?
It's a tough choice, honestly. Everything sounds so cool. But I think I'm most drawn to La Condesa and Roma.
Yeah.
Those neighborhoods, that whole fantasy version of Mexico City, that really got me.
It's a fantastic choice. Those neighborhoods have a charm you won't find anywhere else.
Thinking beautiful architecture, parks, so all those trendy vibes,
Vaguely.
rooftop bars. Yeah, that sounds like my kind of place.
You'll be surrounded by gorgeous Art Deco buildings, tons of cafes, boutiques, and that real sense of community the video talked about.
Can't wait to wander around and soak it all in. Plus, I've heard La Condesa and Roma have amazing street art.
Oh, get your camera ready. Mexico City's known for it, but those neighborhoods are like hot spots. Murals everywhere, buildings, alleyways bursting with color.
I'm already picturing myself getting lost in this maze of colorful murals.
It's quite the sight.
I'm also thinking about doing a food tour in that area.
Brilliant idea.
What do you think?
It's the perfect way to try all the different flavors and get those insider recommendations.
Right.
Plus, it's fun, and you get to meet people.
Exactly. Combining sightseeing and delicious food, what's better? Speaking of food, it reminds me, we haven't really talked about budget.
Uh-huh.
Any tips for, like, managing expenses in Mexico City? I know it's generally more affordable than a lot of other big cities,
You're right.
but I'm still looking for good value.
It can be as affordable or expensive as you make it, really.
Okay.
Overall, though, it's much easier on the wallet than places like, the U.S. or Europe.
Phew. That's good to hear. Any specific areas where I can save or splurge?
Well, when it comes to food, street